Hello, and welcome to Get Recc'd. I am your host, Don Falgout.
And I am your other host, Stephen Falgu. Get Recc'd is our occasional podcast where every episode I recommend something to Don and they recommend something to me, and then we discuss it in the next episode. This is our first episode coming off a long line of re-recs and re-reviews. So finally, we're back to actually being a podcast. So welcome, everyone.
Yeah, and it
What was
was.
actually, just quickly, Don, I just want to give a little peek behind the curtain to everyone.
Mhm.
What was crazy is we recorded all of those episodes, all of the re-review episodes, actually before we recorded the original episode covering the material. And we were like, okay, we'll hold on to this until we need to use it to fill space, kind of in our off season. And it's crazy that it just so happened to all work out like that.
Yeah, we're very thoughtful on Get Recc'd. We put a lot of time spending time together talking about like how we're going to put out these episodes and which order. And what's really what you all might be shocked to find out is that the order these episodes come out in and the dates they come out in is actually completely different than when we record them. Stephen and I have a very, admittedly a little convoluted, but it makes sense to us, method of recording Get Recc'd, where we will record episodes just years before we plan them to come out. I mean, this episode is probably recorded like 5 years after when you're hearing it, because we are also time travelers. And so,
What's crazy is when we reference things that people say in the live chat, that's just us making something up, and then it's just wild that it actually happens because we're seers and we know the past and the future.
yeah, not the present though. We have a
But that's
blind
why
spot for the present.
if anyone was curious why we could never really remember what we scored something before or anything like that, it's because again, we recorded the re-review of the thing before we actually recorded the review of the thing years ago. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, our memory is very selective. We can remember and also like see things in the future like incredibly well sometimes, and then other times we can't even remember a number we gave something. So it's very odd. Um, but it.
And sometimes we don't even remember numbers, that's more difficult in everyday life, but
That's true. That's true. Yeah. So if you're ever wondering why something seems a little odd for literally any reason in any Get Wrecked episode, it's because we're time travelers. There's no other explanation. It doesn't even matter what it is. It just has something to do with that. Sometimes things get a little bit lost in translation. Some of the stuff going on in 2026, a little bit different than what was going on in 2023. So it can be a little weird sometimes, and it can be a little bit off-putting to the viewers, I think, maybe.
and canonically you cannot disprove or discredit any of our opinions because in the future we're the only ones to exist, so our opinions are fact.
And
And
with
that's just
that,
how it is.
I think that we should go ahead and give our factual opinion on what you recommended to me last time, Stephen.
Oh, I thought we were going to do the other one
I am
first.
stupid because for some reason I flip them around in my head. You see, this is
See,
the
this
result of time travel. It screws with you a little bit, but
Yeah, it's
it's
difficult.
true. So this is what I will recommend to Steven in 2027 when we record this episode, the previous episode to this one, in the order that they air. And what I recommended to Steven was the 1979 film Alien. This is a 1979 horror film directed by Ridley Scott, and sci-fi horror film, sorry, and it features an alien, as you can tell in the cover, and there are eggs in it as well. So the cover art's actually quite telling as to what you're going to see in the film, which is always really nice because false advertising
They
is
don't
something that I am firmly against.
they don't crack like that in the movie though. So there is a little bit of false advertising.
Well, that's true, but also a lot of the times the eggs are kind of submerged under the ground a little bit in the film, and you don't actually know what's cracking under the surface. So maybe they did crack like that, and you just didn't see it.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. It's like when you get a carton of eggs and one of them, you think they're all good, and then you take them home, and then you're like, oh man, I didn't notice at the bottom of this one, it was split. And now the yolk's everywhere.
Yeah, and it was green in the center.
Yeah, it was green, and there's a xenomorph now in my room. What am I gonna do? But That's what I love about this movie. Is there's a xenomorph in the room, and it's so distilled to just that. That's basically what I want to talk about. It's like I don't know. This film is just so narratively concise. Like legitimately, there's no fluff. You don't. There's world building, but you're not hammered with the intricacies of like how this world operates or exists. There, you get some little bits and pieces, but it's like it's really in medio res, the whole movie. You're like dropped in the middle of this event and you follow this one specific event and that's the whole film. And I love that about Alien because there's an added layer of tension or an added layer of pressure on the viewer because you legitimately don't really know what's going on. Not just from the standpoint of like you never really know where the alien is or really like the circumstances surrounding the alien, but you don't really understand all the nuance of the world. Like literally you wake up in a kind of metaphorical sense with the at the same time as the people on the ship wake up, and now you're just in the middle of this and you got to figure it out. And one, I must say, like, not only is it narratively concise, but each actor plays their role so with such precision. It's just so much fun to watch on screen and very suspenseful. Fun in a way where it's like, you really feel that anticipation. Uh, I'll kind of let you go here, but the last thing I want to say before we kind of dive deeper is, however, with all that being said, I think one of the definite issues of this film is the special effects definitely do not hold up. And a lot of it now looks pretty silly, unfortunately. Everything surrounding it, and a lot of the set design, and the camera angles, and the shots, and the lighting, and the cinematography, all that looks great. H.R. Geiger's designs still look great, but all of it in motion looks very clunky today.
Yeah, I think that what's so cool about Alien, and this is something the series has gone on much longer now. I mean, not only 4 films in the mainline Alien series, but then there's also like 2 prequel films. There's like so much, and beyond movie, there's obviously Alien versus Predator. Yeah, but even
Alien
beyond
versus
film,
The Rock, Alien versus John Cena.
Even beyond film, though, there's so many video games and so much extraneous material to the Alien universe. It's I'm not going to put it on the same level as like Star Wars, but it's it's similar in the sense that there's so much expanded universe, expanded lore to this now. Which I have not engaged in a lot of it. I've seen all 4 of the mainline films, and that's about it. But I will say that even just the thought of that kind of annoys me. What is so cool about the first film, and only the first film, this is not cool about any of the other ones, is that the first film, there is so much of a surrounding setting and universe and lore that is here. It's just not explained. And much as Steven was saying, that it puts you into that, you start the story where these characters, I mean, it's not where they started, I suppose, but it's where they started in the ship anyway, after they wake up from like a cryogenic sleep. And even though they probably know what they're doing and you don't, other than that, the experience from that point and onward is very much the same between you and them. My favorite part of this film, I think this entire film is perfect, honestly, but my favorite part of the film is like the opening 30 or 40 minutes before any it's not a spoiler to say there's an alien that kills people in the movie. What am I talking about? Before any of the alien killing people stuff happens. And all that stuff's great, and I can talk about it too. But the build up to this is incredible. I've really seen very few massively popular horror films that do this nearly as well. Because in these scenes where they're exploring this planet that they've landed on, and all of the startup is happening with how the alien gets on the ship and that sort of thing. The characters are all being thrust into this world that's so expansive and interesting and like inhuman in ways that you rarely see even in sci-fi. It's so incredibly alien because of H.R. Geiger's just incredible art design for this film. But you'll see these things that the characters will also see that clearly have a story to them. Like something is going on here, but it just, the film knows that that doesn't matter. It knows that giving you those hints allows you to kind of, it allows you to be to have suspense in your brain, like what the fuck is this, why is this happening, what is this, where are they? And that's, it's just enough where you want to know, but you also don't need to know. And it casts up that uncertainty too. So when things do start to happen, it's like you could kind of see it coming, but how it was going to happen and why it was going to happen, who knows? Like the main thing I'm referring to, and one of the coolest, most striking images in the film is when they're entering this like kind of chamber. There's this massive room that looks like this kind of alien technology, and in the center of the room there's like a corpse, or maybe it's not a corpse, you don't really know what it is, but it's connected to all of these tubes and all of these just strange devices and things that like they don't this stuff does get explained in later films. I think Prometheus is all about this shit, but like who, like it's so irrelevant. The point is that you're looking at this and you're like, what the fuck? And then shit just happens. And it's crazy. Like the film has such a great level of mystery to it. It's why it's so scary. It's why the horror of the film like works. Because this alien is not explained to you. You don't know the extent of its power. But as the film goes along, you realize that it is incredibly strong and that it seems like it's just unkillable. A lot of horror films will set up a monster or a paranormal event or something and give it rules. Like they feel like they kind of have to have rules for it. You know, like think of any slasher film. There's something that grounds it so that you kind of know, like, okay, here's how you might be able to kill the monster and that sort of thing. And Alien doesn't really give you that, especially like with the design of the alien being as strange and unreal as it is, and with how little you actually see it, you just are left with so few ideas as to like where the story's going to go. And it makes it really, really, really scary, and that's what I like about it. And I also agree that it is a very focused, linear story. Like there's so much to tell here, and yet they don't tell you that. What they tell you is this crew, and now there's an alien on their ship, and everyone's gonna die, and that's the story, even though there's so much else to delve into around it.
Yeah. And the other thing is they play with it not only like, you know, in a meta context, but literally. Like you with the characters are trying to unravel ways that that you can put rules around this monster. Things like them being, you know, as a group collectively being like, okay, well, you know, fire, typically pretty much every animal responds to fire, so it must respond to fire. And the way that they play with that in the film, as well as as a viewer trying to unravel it all, it's like so masterful. And the other thing is, it's like not only it's a coming of age story for the monster too that you're watching in a certain sense, because as it starts as a face hugger into the chest burster into kind of this full size thing, all in the sense of the movie, like it's a weird coming of age because like
Classic
you as a
coming
viewer
of
are trying
age
to
alien.
yeah right. And the next one is like when it's in high school, you got to figure out its romantic crushes. It gets on the football team for a
First
while.
sexual experience, also.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's so interesting because you as a viewer have an attachment to this creature in a way that a coming of age story might give you, but kind of in the inverse sense. Like you don't understand the nuance or the characteristics of this creature, and then it like only builds from there. It's like, okay, so you have the face hugger. Face hugger attaches itself to somebody. What does that mean? You and the characters on the ship are trying to understand that. Oh, it looks like the guy's okay. No, now the face huggers kind of almost become like implanted sort of this parasitic creature, and then that thing grows up, and then it's this weird lanky ass multi-mouthed thing that kills everybody and can't die. And the other thing that I think is so interesting is like Scott Ridley was so determined to make this thing not die that actually originally, I don't know if you ever heard this. I saw this on the Wikipedia, but originally Scott Ridley did not want the creature to die. Scott Ridley actually wanted the creature to rip Ripley's head off and then like give the audio log as Ripley and like survive in space.
Oh my god. That would have been a bit of a different film, I
Yeah, the
think.
producer shot that one down, and I think that I like the way that it went this way, I think, more than the
Yeah.
other. I mean, the line where he's like, "I got you, you son of a bitch," is just so good and
Yeah.
iconic.
Well,
I don't know, like ultimately, I don't know. I'll say like one little bit, like just specifically centering around that scene. Ultimately, I don't know how I necessarily feel around kind of the fourth act twist of like, oh, actually the alien's on their ship and she has to fight it again. Although the payoff is incredible. Um, that probably turns it around enough for me, but I do think the film definitely could have ended with, Ripley kind of going to rest after having blown the ship up, which is what ultimately kind of happens. She fights the alien again. The payoff of that fight is incredible, like I said, but I don't know if it was necessary.
it might not have been necessary, but I think it added a lot of extra suspense there at the end. I mean, maybe it's a tactic we're more used to now or something, but it is cool that the film kind of has a false ending. I think it works well. Well, and also,
Another thing, sorry, just quickly, the one other thing, I'm sure we'll dive into this a little bit. What is so great about this film is every character besides Ripley ultimately is expendable, but none of them feel expendable. Like each character carries so much weight, even though all of them ultimately are just set pieces to be murdered by a giant alien. And I think that that is very hard to pull off, and this film does it so incredibly well.
well, it adds a lot to the sci-fi political undercurrent that every sci-fi has to have as well. That the crew is expendable, but um, but you do grow to love them all as humans and as people. They give you so much time to, and yet at the end of the day, they're all here on a mission by a giant corporation to do something that's going to result in them all dying. Um, which is, it's effective. It works. I also think we already. I mean, it's hard to spoil a movie that's this classic or whatever, but we've already done it, so I don't care anymore. I think like there are a lot of good twists with that too. Like one of the crewmates being like a robot that was programmed to do God knows what, just for the sake of the mission or whatever, is like a really great twist that's in here. That like it's pretty creative, honestly. Like it was really not a necessary element at all. But it adds a lot of extra tension. It adds a lot of uncertainty to the film, just like everything else does. It's a nice little twist to have in there, and I think that scene is also great. It's nice to have more than one threat, even though the crux of the movie is this one alien threat. I think it adds extra suspense there. But I mean, honestly, like all that's great. This film works super, super well as a horror film, and the story is simple enough and it works, and then we've gone into that. But what I like the most about this movie is just the look and feel of it. It's so unique. Like H.R. Geiger is such an incredible artist. He his designs have outlived themselves. I mean, we're all more familiar with what the xenomorph is now because this is now a series and it's a famous movie monster or whatever, but compare this to any other movie monster or horror villain or like whatever you want to call it. The xenomorph is on such another level of design. Like it's such an incredible, strange looking thing. And really a lot of its design is it's just a bunch of big dicks, but I mean that's what H.R. Geiger did. He drew a lot of dicks, and there's dicks all over the movie. But like that kind of, also that sexual angle to the art design is in like the story as well. You have the face hugger, which is kind of an inherently sexual thing, and there's all this really uncomfortable, gross kind of like sexual imagery in the film, again because of H.R. Geiger. that also really adds to it. There's just not really another like sci-fi movie that I can think of that comes close in terms of like this unique, amazing design. And it's not just in the alien stuff. Also, like the set design of the ship is just immaculate. And you're right that the special effects don't really hold up super well today. Some of them look pretty terrible, honestly. A lot of that. It's a good thing you don't see the alien much because whenever you do, it is so obviously a person in a suit if it is moving. And the one bit where you do get to see it for a bit of an extended period of time as it's getting thrown out of the ship, it looks pretty bad. So I will grant that. But, like, that's something I can look past for a film from 1979, especially for a film that, aside from that, looks so incredible even today. I was lucky enough to see this movie in theaters. They did a run of it nearby. I don't know if it's luck. I don't know how often they run it in theaters, but I caught it in a theater, I should say. And it is just one of the most spellbinding, visually stunning films like ever. It's up there with Space Odyssey, honestly. Like the only difference is this film doesn't revel in its imagery as much as Space Odyssey does, but like purely talking about the way that it looks and the cinematography and everything, it is up there, I think. It is a breathtaking movie, and the lighting also is just spectacular. Like, there's an entire, at least quarter of the film. I was gonna say third, that might be overkill, but there's like a quarter of the film where it's just kind of strobe lights in your face, like the entire time, as the ship is preparing for a self-destruct and Ripley's running through the halls. Like, the lights are like just flashing, and it's headache inducing, but like it's tense and it looks so good. That coupled with like fog effects and all these little things to make the ship feel like alive and breathing, it's so good looking. Costume design, all that stuff is just like on point.
I will say there are some portions of the world that are kind of funny to me. Like, it's funny to me that for the ship to go into a self-destruct, it just has to blow fog, like in every which way.
Yeah. Well, it's ignitable fog, you see, because when the fire hits the fog, it combusts. I don't know, but it looks cool. Like,
yeah, it does.
Yeah. I don't know, like it's visuals that have held up so well that they transfer into any like alien thing ever. Like I played Alien Isolation. If I can think of like one alien product aside from the mainland films that I've experienced, I've played that game. And that game gets by solely on the designs and aesthetic of this one movie and nothing else. And people really like that game too. Like this has lived on so much because again, I think these designs are just incredible. I think they're timeless, and they hold up so much better than other sci-fi, other horror, just whatever you can think of that I can think of really. And I think aside from the main crux of the story, which is really, really great, I think that's where this film works so well for me. It's why I personally like this way more than any other Alien movie. Even Aliens, there's like the time-tested debate, which one is better. I don't think that debate should be had. I mean, I guess if you're an action movie fan and you like guns getting shot or whatever, that Aliens is really cool. And like it is really good. But as a sequel to this film, to me, I just don't think it captures anywhere near the same level of like uniqueness. And I mean, obviously it doesn't, it's a sequel, but this film has an atmosphere, it has a mood, it has a vibe that I just rarely find, especially in like giant, massive, popular blockbuster classics like this. And that's why I think this movie is so good.
Yeah, I do want to say though, and you know, I don't want to get into it too much because I'm sure Aliens is potentially on the table at some point in the future. But one thing I wanted to say as we kind of start to wrap up talking about Alien 1 is we mentioned something when we talked about Jurassic Park 1 and 2 that I think is very fitting to talk about when talking about Alien 1 and Alien 2. Because one thing that we mentioned when we talked about Jurassic Park 1 and 2 is that there's such a thematic shift between 1 and 2 that it's incredibly jarring. Like, 1 is so suspenseful, edge of your seat. 2 is so like action-packed slasher film. And Alien 1 and Aliens are very much within that same context. Alien 1 is such a slowly paced, I mean, incredibly slowly paced. We mentioned that it's very concise, but that concise narrative plays out over the course of the entire runtime,
It's true, yeah.
and it takes its time, and perfectly, I might add, it incredibly well. That is not a knock against the film, but it is suspenseful and it holds you for that full runtime. Versus Aliens is just a straight up action movie, but the connection there to me personally feels much more cohesive and honestly much better. Like both films are much better than when we talked about Jurassic Park 1 and 2. I thought I would just mention that as kind of the antithesis or kind of the wrapping up, the closing of the loop of what we mentioned when we were talking about Jurassic Park 1 and 2, because I do think that idea can actually be carried out very well. I think that you can coexist within the same universe but take it in a different direction, and Aliens I think does that very, very well and captures that spirit incredibly well.
Yeah, I would agree, and and you're right that Aliens is on the table. I will just say, like, I don't mean to shit talk it too much. I think the movie is really good. The only reason I bring it up is that I think that I personally just wish and if anyone can give me something at some point, please do. I just want to find a movie that's like this, not just kind of like it. I mean, like really like it, like something that's so immersive, and yet so
Checked
like.
out. Have you checked out Valerian?
That's true.
Have you?
Very, very immersive. A lot of amazing, interesting world building, unexplained
Mhm.
world building. It's really good. Yeah, no, but just something that is so not only immersive, but then like it has so much of a world to it that it doesn't even touch. For some reason, that is so fascinating to me about this movie, and it's why I don't really want to watch any of the Prometheus movies because I don't want that ruined for me. I think it's stupid that they would. Like, it makes perfect sense, right? There's so much to go into, but I think it works because they don't. And I wish that it would have stayed that way. And I've heard some of the explanations that Prometheus provides for this movie. Like, I've heard about what it is, and I think it's so stupid that maybe one day we'll have to wreck it and figure it out for ourselves. But anyway, you can wrap it up if you want to. Go ahead.
Maybe we could just watch the school play. Ever heard
I
about that?
have not heard about this. What school play? Prometheus?
Yeah, high school. No, a high school created a play version of Alien,
Ooh,
and they had no budget to do so, so it's like all with like toys and stuff.
that
I'm pretty
sounds
sure you could find it online.
amazing.
Anyway, this is easily, and I guess spoiler if we talk about Aliens as well, but both Alien and Aliens are easily within my top 10 films of all time. And it's hard for me. I go back and forth. Any given day, I could say this one or Aliens is my favorite, but they are so different that I think that they can exist in a space like that because they both carry, although they are sequels to one another, as we mentioned, they're both so thematically different that it's really kind of like whatever you're looking for, one might kind of float above the other. But this film is just a masterpiece. I mean, really deserves all the accreditation that it gets. And it's not only a masterpiece, I feel like, in the horror genre, but also in the science fiction genre. Because this was right around the same time as something like, a Star Wars, really kind of defining science fiction in film, at least, kind of taking some of those early science fiction films and pushing them into the new genre, the new landscape.
Yeah, like a modern science fiction.
A
kind
modern
of
science
movie.
fiction. And this took that idea and just executed it so masterfully that it's hard not to give Alien a 10. And I know we've been giving out a lot recently, but I just can't give it anything else, honestly. Every time I watch this film, I am just amazed. As I've watched it more and more, there are little things, like I said, like definitely some of the special effects don't hold up. Some of it probably looks very silly today, especially to a new eye. But even that has a certain charm to it that that it can look so, I don't know, fake at times, especially fake at times, and still be so suspenseful as it is just really a credit to it. So I absolutely recommend it.
Yeah, I would definitely give this film a 10. This is the top 5 for me, and Aliens doesn't approach that area for me. Not that I don't like it, but just to bounce off of you, I guess. But yeah, like I think that I've said everything I need to, but ultimately I think that this movie is such an artful horror film. Like it feels like I compared it to Space Odyssey, and I don't think they're comparable in many ways. But in the same way that that film is so like artful about its presentation, this is like that, but in a more accessible horror oriented kind of way, and it works for horror. And I think like even aside from sci-fi, just as a horror film or like especially as like a monster movie, like what else are you gonna get that's on this level? I don't even know. And it's just a beautiful movie. I think it's one of the most visually interesting movies that I've ever seen. And all that just works together. So yeah, I definitely give it a 10. And I mean, I recommend this movie to absolutely everybody. Most people, I would assume, have seen it, but if you haven't, you definitely should. And that about wraps up that one. So should we get into what you recommended to me, Steven?
Yes, so last time I recommended to you the 1995 Smashing Pumpkins album Mellon Collie and the Infinite Sadness. This was, I don't know how I would describe it, but almost like a pop opera in a way. Kind of their move to the more mainstream, but still very alt rock and grunge as they were known for to this point. In this album in particular, they move a little more into kind of the art rock spectrum. But this album is, most people will likely know songs from this album as kind of their defining work. Most of their radio hits, or their hits in general, even without radio play, come from Mellon Collie and the Infinite Sadness. And they, as a group, really sat down and took the additional time and those additional steps to kind of try to create a more cohesive work and a much longer work too. I think this is a 2-disc album, and I
Yep, a
want to say
double
pretty
album.
much, yeah, I want to say pretty much both discs are like an hour long at a minimum.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to be clear, somebody already said it in comments, but yes, I put 1996. It's 1995. I am aware of this, and I apologize. I know it's a big deal, but yeah, yeah. I mean, and you're right. Like this album, from what I've seen, was a really big seller. It hit number one when it debuted, which is like not a thing that double albums do. Like a double album is always viewed as a very indulgent step for a band or an artist to take. Like that's usually the moment where an artist feels like they can do whatever they want and that people will listen. They put out a double album. And there is definitely a stigma attached to that. There is always the a lot of people feel like that carries with it some level of pretentiousness or or bloat. And it is true that a lot of double albums can often feel rather bloated. But I don't think that the format is without merit at all because there are so many classic beloved records that are double albums that people don't even think about. I mean, like the number of great double albums out there, like this is a format that can totally work. For Smashing Pumpkins, it's not like their albums were really short anyway. I mean, the album before this that was really their breakthrough, Siamese Dream, it's already like over an hour. This is just doubling that, which I don't know, for a band that was at the level that they were at that time, I don't think it was really something that was out of the question. I don't think it's too crazy of a move. And it paid off, right? It also, like Siamese Dream, they were already a really big band that already had some huge hit singles like Today and Disarm. And probably one of the other singles on that. Those are the two huge ones, but yeah. It already had some big radio singles. It already was really making waves because alt rock and grunge were really in, and Smashing Pumpkins weren't really a grunge band, but they were close enough that they could be pushed that way, and really Mellon Collie was like just an answer to that. I mean, the radio singles that come off of Mellon Collie, like this is such a stacked set of singles for the most part, like. Tonight, Zero, Bullet with Butterfly Wings, and 1979. Like, these are the band's biggest songs. I don't really know. Well, maybe like Disarm is pretty huge too. But yeah, like it had that drive to push it to the place that it got. And it's true that I would say like this is what made the band last. Although they didn't last, because then I guess people got disappointed with everything else. So whatever.
Well, they had some band tragedy and various other events that
That's
kind
true.
of transpired as well.
It was a lot of unfortunate events. It's true. Yeah. Anyway, all of that context aside, I have a bit of a troubled history with Mellon Collie because this wasn't always an album I liked very much. Siamese Dream is one of my like top 50 at least favorite albums. I think Siamese Dream is a masterpiece, and it's an album that like, especially as I was really getting into music and I really liked like 90s alt rock and shit, like that album, I put that on like all the fucking time. And I've gone back to it after listening to Mellon Collie again. It's just an incredible record. And Mellon Collie is a weird follow-up in a lot of ways. There's a lot of weird things about Mellon Collie. I think the weirdest thing is the presentation of it, because it's suggestive of something I don't really think is there. Like, this cover art is like one of the most incredible cover arts ever. Like, it's such an amazing, beautiful cover art, but it hints at an album that you don't really get. And I think that would
Alt
confuse
cover
you.
is incredible too. I just want to say quickly, the alt cover is incredible as well.
That you're talking about the 2012 reissue one, the one with like all
Yeah.
the expanded. Yeah, it is really really cool. No, it's true. The actually the artwork in general for the packaging is amazing. There's more art in the CD that is just amazing, and and it and that coupled with the fact that like the album opens on like Tonight Tonight, as well as like this like lush piano instrumental intro, it sets you up for an album that Mellon Collie really isn't. Mellon Collie isn't really like this sweeping, fantastical, like theatrical kind of concept that it sort of suggests itself to be. It's more kind of like it's like a little bit of that, and a lot of like Smashing Pumpkins getting really, really heavy, like even heavier than Siamese Dream. It alternates between being like more bombastic and theatrical than Siamese Dream, and more lush and soft, and then simultaneously being like way heavier and darker than Siamese Dream at the same time. And it kind of has these two ideas, and it fluctuates between them in very awkward ways a lot of the time. Like even if you listen to the main set of singles from this album, they don't really sound like they come off of the same record. Like Bullet with Butterfly Wings, that title will always be hard for me to say, comes off of the same album as like 1979 and Tonight Tonight, which just doesn't. It's very odd. But you know, a lot of double albums get off on the ability to be so varied, and that's often like the strength of a double album, is that an artist can do whatever the hell they want. It just doesn't really feel to me like that's what Smashing Pumpkins did here, because there almost isn't enough variety. It's like there's maybe like 2 or 3 main ideas they'll switch between, and while these ideas like are really different, they don't really fit on the same album super well. I think the track list, if there's one major complaint I have with Mellon Collie, that's probably the reason why I didn't like this album a lot, like in my memory, is because this track list is ordered in a bit of a weird way. I think that there was a way they could have made this like real dark heaviness work with the super light, lush, pretty stuff, but the album often falls into the trap of like hitting these blocks where it'll just be one of those things and then switching to a couple songs of the other thing, as opposed to mixing them all in like a really perfect balance, I think. And I've talked for a while, so that's my main complaint. I'll get into the good stuff after, but I'll let Steven say what he thinks about that.
I agree. I think that there's 2 identities on this album, and some of it is purposeful. Like, although I'll talk about this first, but like disc 1 is daytime, disc 1 is nighttime, right? So intentionally, there's 2 identities. But then even the band has kind of come out and said, well, it's not really a concept. So even those identities I feel like are muddled, and all of that flows into what you mentioned, which is that like even track to track identities feel muddled. Like I don't feel like there's real cohesion here. In certain spots there are, and then it's kind of like a switch turns on and Corgan remembered that he wanted the band to be a grunge band,
Yeah.
and that in other places they didn't. So it's very strange. Um, but I think what's so interesting about the album, though, is I do like the One Identity. Well, I really like both. I mean, to be honest, I like this album quite a bit. Uh, but I think that sweeping kind of art rock style, like for them to have taken sort of grunge roots and brought them into that space, I think was interesting. And those are the tracks that I find, and the portions of this album that I find the most interesting. Those that seem to have some concept behind them, but it all gets kind of lost in the mix. And there's so much here that it's easy to lose all that. But I think about like even taking this a step higher. So you mentioned the art, but I'll even mention the videos because the music videos for some of these tracks are incredible.
That's true.
And like the Tonight Tonight music video is one of my all-time favorite music videos ever. Like that's just it's first of all, it's such an incredible homage to Georges Méliès, but that also just plays into the entire thematic, like the concept of the track, of the album art and those first two songs, but then all of that kind of gets lost in the mix anyway. So I 100% agree with you. I think the biggest downfall of this track is that they clearly had a lot of intention behind what they were doing, but that intention feels like it got lost along the way.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said there. And I was not going to mention the music videos, but you're totally right. They're so good. The Tonight Tonight one in particular, but the one for Zero, Bullet with Butterfly, all of them, they're like really, really good videos. So it was a great MTV album, I'm sure. Yeah, so, okay. So I got that out of the way. That's like my main complaint. Well, my other complaint is that some of these songs fucking suck, but that'll get to that in a second. But like overall, this album is really packed with like a lot of really great songs, and it is different enough from Siamese Dream. I think that even the singles on this separate themselves from the stuff from Siamese Dream enough, or that this really stands on its own. But like some of the heavy tracks on this are like really, really, really good. Smashing Pumpkins and their producers always, well, at least on this and Siamese Dream at the very least, they're able to create such a thick and layered and sludgy guitar sound, like something you would expect to come out of like a sludge metal record, but they can put it in such a melodic and like radio friendly package. And I don't know how they do it. One of the best examples of this is the first like heavy track on the album, Jelly Belly, which is like such a thick and heavy and sludgy sounding song, but it opens up into this chorus that's like so beautiful and melodic and anthemic, which is something they do on a lot of tracks here. And it was something they did on Siamese Dream also. I don't think this is necessarily new for them, but it's like it's a sound that they just nail so well. And Corgan's voice is very unconventional, but it's also like really, really, really good. And it's amazing, especially on this album, the amount of sounds that he can like fit. Despite the fact that his voice is odd and nasally, he can sing a song like Tonight Tonight, and it sounds great. And it shouldn't. And so I think this album gives you a lot of that. I mean, there are tracks on here that have him singing over some odd stuff for his voice and for his range. But it just works most of the time. And I think that when the album does find moments but where it can balance the soft side with the heavy side, I think it works in spades. Like one of the best moments on the track list for me is on disc 2, and it's Stumbling into XYU, which Stumbling is like one of the softest songs on the record. It's like a purely acoustic number. It's really, really beautiful. And then XYU is like the darkest, most insane track on the record. And they fit each other so well. They go back to back like so well. And both songs are enhanced in the process. But then I also think that when the album does decide to kind of stick to being heavy, it also finds like really great stretches of tracks, like from Jelly Belly up to Bullet with Butterfly Wings, which I think I don't think I've said that name correctly once, but anyway, that stretch of tracks right there like flows so well together. that it's almost like you can find little sections of where like you can find little albums within this album, little points where stretches of tracks really do work incredibly well. Um, Also, the album has a couple of like longer cuts, um, like Porcelina of the Vast Oceans, which is the over 9 minute track here, that are just really grand and sweeping and really really great. That track is super super good, very psychedelic too. It matches. It's one of the only tracks that attempts to match both of the album's main ideas like together into one song, and I think it works super well. Um, I'll stop for a second. I have more to say, but yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned um, Corgan's voice and the production of the guitar, but not only that, Corgan's guitar playing on this album, some of the solos that are performed are so good as well. So kudos there. And then, I mean, with any this era 90s band, the bass is just so dirty and I love it.
Yeah.
And it's there here too. I mean, not always. You know, you have the more sweeping tracks where it's more subdued, but when it gets to that hard stuff, it's so good. They had such a knack for that.
Also, the Jimmy Chamberlain, the drummer, is a beast. Like, and some of these tracks like have him performing some of the best stuff he's ever done. Um, XYU is a great example of that. Like, I think, yeah, I mean, instrumental performances on this are incredible. Even in there's a Cupid DeLocke has like harp, and the harp playing is amazing. There's just the sweeping orchestrations of like Tonight Tonight and stuff like that. There's just so many great instrumental moments across it too. Um, Something else I wanted to say. I think disc one of this album is pretty much spectacular. I don't like Love very much. I think that song's a little ugly in a way that doesn't really suit it. But other than that, the first disc is super good. And it flows well enough. It still has the problem I talked about earlier, but it has more stretches of tracks that work really well together than disc 2 does. Disc 2 is where things get a little bit shakier for me. Because the heavier tracks aren't usually as good, though they are still very good. And it has XYU on it. I think XYU is one of my favorite tracks. It reminds me a lot of like what Silverfuck does on Siamese Dream, which is like my favorite Smashing Pumpkins song. I really love when they do these like long, jammy, heavy tracks where they just kind of rock the fuck out for like a bunch of minutes. It's really sick, and I like that track a lot. But there are songs on disc 2 that just suck. Like, Beautiful is embarrassing. I think that song is embarrassing. I don't know why that was included. I was reading in the liner notes. I have the 2012 reissue, and I was reading the liner notes where Corgan like goes into all the songs and stuff. And apparently, the producer was considering dropping 1979, which, you know, now is like one of the most lasting fan favorite Smashing Pumpkins songs, one of their most recognizable tracks. Many people would say one of their best. I'm personally not a giant fan of it, but still, like,
we haven't mentioned it yet, but what's crazy is that song 1979 is actually about Alien.
That's true.
It was written about Alien because 1979 is the year Alien came out, so they were like, we want to write an Alien song.
Yeah, and it's really amazing. But anyway, I just think it's odd that they considered dropping that, but then they include songs like Beautiful and We Only Come Out at Night and Lily, My One and Only. Like, all three of my least favorite songs were like back to back on this record, which sucks. And it's like towards the end too, which doesn't really help with the pacing. But these are the songs where the lighter theatrical kind of side of the album, or whatever the hell they were trying to do in some of these songs, just doesn't work. And these feel like songs you would imagine on like a bloated double album. They just don't, they're not good, let alone, you know, fit the flow or enhance the record in any way. Though thankfully, I think the album picks itself up in the last two tracks. And so, yeah, I think that, like, I don't want to do the thing where I say, oh, there's a good single album in here. They should have made it one disc, because everybody says that about like every double album ever. But it is definitely true that there's a little bit of bloat here. I definitely think there's a couple tracks that probably shouldn't have been on here. There's a couple tracks that don't really fit. Even 1979, great of a song as it is, doesn't really fit the album super well. It does feel like a single more than other tracks do. But you know, I guess in a way that can also work to its charm. I mean, it is kind of neat to hear the band just do a bunch of shit, even stuff that doesn't work. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword.
I think we could maybe start wrapping it up.
Yeah, sure. Overall, I would give the album an 8. At its best, I think this is some of the band's finest stuff. Like, I think some of these radio singles are like some of their best songs. It's one of their best sets of singles. I think the set of singles on Siamese Dream is better, but that's just because I think that album is basically perfect. So of course the singles are all amazing. But as far as like songs ready for radio, songs that will last a really long time, songs that everybody can know, like this set of singles is really, really great. And the album works on its own too. It's just it's a little bit cluttered. It's more that the structure is poor than it is that the songs are bad, because I think this set of songs is really great overall. I just think it's a slight disappointment because the album sets out to do greater things than maybe it accomplishes. But it still accomplishes something really, really good. And I still think like this is an essential record. I mean, this is a 90s classic. That's already the case. And I do recommend it. I think anyone who wants to get into Smashing Pumpkins should definitely listen to Siamese Dream first, because I think it's a much better album anyway. But it's also, you know, a lot less bloated. It's a lot more concise, and the songs are just like all amazing. Whereas here, you pick and choose a little bit, but still, like, it is a really great album.
I probably sit around the same score. I might be a little more positive on it, maybe something like an 8.5, but not much. I mean, I agree. It's hard to sit through. I mean, it's a really great album, but it's not one that I would put on a lot, especially because there is quite a bit of bloat. Not all the tracks are perfect, but when this thing hits, it really hits. And when you kind of get swept up in it, it is incredible. And like I said, it's like not just the album, but also the music videos, everything surrounding it, and then the single tracks coming off of this are just some of the best work that they produced, honestly. So with that, I 100% agree. I definitely recommend it.
Okay, and I think with that, we should move on to our recommendations if you are ready to.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, so I would like to recommend the album Band on the Run by Paul McCartney and Wings. This is not a solo album from Paul McCartney, but an album from Paul McCartney's band, the band that Paul McCartney was known for being in, Wings. And
his only band, actually.
Yeah. So
before he went solo.
Yeah. So we're continuing our tradition of talking about 4 musicians who are completely unrelated, such as George Harrison, Paul McCartney, and some films that they may have been in. I just think that that's a really interesting series of things to talk about, you know, not for any particular reason, but these are just very interesting musicians who just were kind of friends with each other, you know.
They were all, I did hear, this is kind of random, that's a fun fact for you. I heard that they were enthusiasts of the beetle, like the insect.
That is, you know, that is a rumor. So I'm not sure. But yeah, I've heard.
Kind of observatory.
Somebody should ask them about that to see if that rumor was true. Should ask Sir Paul McCartney. I'm sure he'd be willing to explain that. But anyway,
yeah, he was actually knighted because of his work with beetles.
Yeah,
beetles, the insects.
That's true.
The Queen was just so taken aback by how well.
That's why he named the band Wings, because I don't know if y'all know this, but beetles actually do have wings. They tend to be under their exoskeleton, but
exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, the year of this album is 1970 something, and it has songs on it, and we'll talk about it next time. And that is my recommendation. What about you?
Okay, people keep coming up to me every day on the street, and they're like, "When are you gonna recommend something new? I'm tired of all this old stuff. Give me the new stuff." So finally, after all this time, I'm gonna recommend something new. Maybe still not that new, but new, I guess. Current. I'm gonna recommend to you something very different. Talking about it will be really something, but I'm gonna recommend to you a video game. This video game is called Call of Duty Warzone. Call of Duty Warzone is a live service game, which honestly I don't even remember what year it came out because even the Wikipedia page just lists this year, which is definitely not true. It was part of the most recent Modern Warfare and actually kind of a continuation of a battle royale that they had produced as part of, I think it was like a Black Ops or something. Call of Duty Warzone, it is a battle royale. It pretty much has feelers in every single Activision developer ever. And we will talk about it next time.
Okay, and that's been our episode. Nothing particularly special about this episode, other than that we talked about Alien and Mellon Collie and the Infinite Sadness, which are quite interesting works of art.
Yeah, again, I do just want to remind everyone that because we are from the future, we don't really know numbers good.
That's true. Yeah, yeah.
So,
I mean,
sorry.
like, one day I'll figure out which episode number this will be. Who knows? But for now, we're not really sure. So I will tell everybody something though that I know is the case because it is 2027 or 2026, and that is that all of these episodes go up on Castbox. I was a bit lazy with that in 2023, so it had been a while before I'd updated them. But now 3 years later, I've finally gotten around to it. So you should have all the episodes up on there now, and I'll try to get this one out as soon as possible. If you are listening on YouTube, then check us out on Castbox. You can download these episodes and listen to us on the go. You can also subscribe on there. And if you are listening on Castbox, then you can find us on YouTube at the YouTube channel Casting 404. We actually stream these episodes live with little overlays, and you can come hang out and chat. And if we predict that your message will be sent, then we will respond to it.
Yeah, and again, this really is the wiki episode because I just want to get one level deeper. The reason why you, as the viewer, you perceive time differently than us, that's why it seems like a lot of the times our episodes aren't 2 weeks apart. But to us, on multiple layers of time, multiple dimensions, we're always 2 weeks apart in every episode. But you know what episode won't be 2 weeks apart? It's a special bonus episode that we recorded. Yes, that's right. Again, a special bonus episode. We've recorded a few of them to this point. This bonus episode that will be going up will be about Bo Burnham's newest special, Inside, which was a Netflix exclusive, although, and we were just talking about this before the podcast, but apparently this week, the week of July 18th, it is going to some theaters across the country as a special limited release, but for the most part is a Netflix special. You can catch our special bonus episode about Bo Burnham's Inside. Of course, we have talked about actually quite a bit of Bo Burnham before this, which is a lot of B's in one sentence, because we had like a kind of trifecta series, and we talked about 3 of Bo's specials. Bo put out a new special, so we talked about it in our bonus episode.
Yeah, that's true. And hopefully that will be out sometime within the next week that y'all are seeing this again. Different week than us, but depending on which way we look at it, of course, because we are in multiple dimensions of time and multiple planes of existence as well, which we didn't even get into, but that's a little bit too much for y'all to understand. And I think that with that, that's pretty much everything, unless there's anything else you wanted to say.
No, that's it.
Okay, well then, with that, those were our thoughts, and those were our recommendations. Get wrecked.